All right. Thank you for coming, guys. So I'll make sure that your time here is worth it because I'm going to talk about a lot of interesting things. How many of you, show of hands, how many of you here are game developers? All of them. Awesome. And how many from mobile background, working or planning to get into mobile? Awesome. So this talk will be very relevant. So once upon a time, all right, I'm not going to talk about Frankenstein, but Frankenstein of the mobile industry right now is LiveOps. And that's why that's how I look at LiveOps and managing LiveOps a mobile game, because it's a nightmare, right? So if you think of Dr. Frankenstein, what he did was he basically wanted to give life to something that he had really a lot of passion about. And similarly, what we do in game development, at least in mobile game development, is like we put in a year's worth of effort in trying to get the game out so that it's top quality and you get all the tutorial funnel in, and then it's there. But that's not what makes money for the company over time. When you pitch for the game, you obviously say that this game is going to make a couple of $1 million over a span of 5 years, 6 years, right? How do you do that? And this talk is basically about how we work as a studio and what are the things that we do and the things that we avoid, and how this could be beneficial for the gaming community, right? Some background. I'm sorry I don't look like this anymore, but these are the few gaming companies that I've worked for, and these are the few games that I've worked for in the past. Few of them, maybe some of you have heard about, or if you haven't, then please download Deer Hunter. That's the game that I currently work on. So quickly going through the agenda, I'm going to talk about the core pillars for us for running effective live operations and what's the LiveOps philosophy that we try to follow. And then what are the 3 most important questions that we try to answer before taking up anything, even it means doing a new IP, new pitch, or even a new feature for an existing game. And some tips and tricks of the trade that we try to follow, and which are industry proven practices that we follow. And maybe it could be obvious for a few people, maybe it not. So maybe you could take away from that. And then finally, I'll conclude the talk. Right? Moving on. Right? Before that, I just wanted to emphasize on why live operations has become such a big deal in the mobile gaming industry. Right? So if you look at how the gaming industry in mobile started from the launch of App Store to mobile gaming, gaming has evolved from making doodle games versus now location-based gaming. Right? The way we look at games has changed. So there were premium games, there were freemium games, and now we have advertising in games. So if you look at the market trend, 40 to 50% of the revenue is being generated through ads. How is that happening, and how gaming companies have been doing it? And the way we look at players have changed. Earlier, we just used to look at how many people downloaded the game by paying $5 in a premium model. But now in a freemium model, players don't actually pay initially. They have to get invested, they have to be engaged, and maybe later, if you're lucky, maybe 1 to 5% of your DAU will pay, right? So how do we do this at Glue? Right? So we have, at least for the studio that I work on, we have 4 core pillars that we operate on. First is your team. It becomes an utmost priority for us to have a really motivated and aligned team, because if you are working in mobile gaming ecosystem, then you would know that pushing out content is a mundane job. You're excited when you're working on new feature, but then the new feature has to run for 6 months, for 12 months, and your team has to be motivated of doing that one piece of content every month, every once in 2 months, or even if you have like a weekly content treadmill, right? And transparency. So we believe in having data access to everyone on the team, so that they know how we're making money and how we're not making money. And on the days we make money, why do we make money? On the days we don't make money, why we don't make money? Having that sense of transparency is usually helpful for the team to ask the right questions when you're in a meeting session or a brainstorm session. And building trust is like pivotal in terms of having a team or making or breaking a team. And on how we prioritize, what are the tools that we use to prioritize? Triaging is a core for us, because we have a laundry list of things that we want to do in a year, but how to pick those right things for the right occasions and have the maximum value provided to the players, right? So we try to have a philosophy around this, saying that you need to have a vision for whatever you're doing. Even if you're making a new game, you would probably say, this is my vision. I want to make the best match 3 game for Android, right? That could be a vision for a new game. But when it comes to an existing game, you would say, I want to have, when I'm building the feature, I want to have X amount of players engaging with this game. So that becomes a vision, and that becomes the vision for the team to rally behind. Right? And we are mostly observation-driven, or rather data-driven. You need to have those KPIs in place. And then roadmaps. We have a lot of roadmaps in terms of how we operate, which I'm going to talk about. It's not exhaustive, but we have certain things that we do in time to get to that. And what we try to always propagate is know your players. So we have weekly playtests about the game so that everyone plays the game every day, once a week, every Friday. And then that's one way we get to know what are the pain points that the players are feeling and how do we try to avoid that, right? So the 3 most important questions we try to answer before doing anything, either pitching a new game within the studio or, if it's a new feature. What are you building, right? Are you building a small feature just to, have early conversions? Or you want more engagement, right? And then you have to introduce a new mechanic because your game is already live. You can't think of making a game within a game. You probably have to think of a new mechanic which organically fits into your core loop. Or you want to have like a huge, the roadmap says a Q4, we want to make a really big feature because it's holiday season. And then you need to have that sense of clarity. What are you building? Either I'm building an experiment, I'm building a really big feature, or I just want to test something out like an experiment, right? The second most important question is, who are you building it for? But when it's a new game, you probably would say, hey, I want to build it for a male audience or a female audience. But when it comes to having a game or a feature build in a LiveOps scenario, you probably would answer, will the new players engage with this? Or will the players who've been engaging for 7 days will have access to this feature? Because you have to make those calls. And this is what we try to answer, like having a sense of clarity of who the feature will be for. And third most important thing is, do you have the team to build it, right? So, some example is that when we were trying to make a PvP feature, and we said, hey, the design is awesome, we have all the engineers that we want to, player facing, but we don't have a server engineer, right? Because how can you have PvP and not have a server engineer or the DevOps team? So that becomes a really important question before you take up stuff. So these are the 3 most important questions that we try to answer. And then the way we try to do, live operations is, like I said, team is the most important thing that we have. So what we do is a weekly anonymous survey where we ask 3 most important questions to the team, and it's anonymous. No one knows who's taken the survey. We just know the functions. So one of them is, how would you rate your work-life balance? Because there's huge hue and cry about time crunch and people crunching, and we want to avoid that. And we try to capture that through an anonymous survey, and team gets to rate from 1 to 10, 1 being worst, 10 being awesome. So if you do that over time, right now we are in, I think, 40 weeks in the year. So we have data worth of 40 weeks, and we see that how the team health is going up or team health is going down. And over time, you'll figure out the trend, saying that, OK, this is the time where team was crunching, and because it was either because it was bad planning, or it was because we needed to crunch because we were having a heavy update. Second thing we try to do to have success at live operations is capacity plans. I know a lot of studios believe in this, and a lot of studios don't believe in capacity plan. But the way we try to do this is, hey, I have 10 people. That equates 10 into, multiply it by the number of months you're planning the roadmap, and then that's the time you have. And then you factor in what are the features that you want to do. And does that equate? Does that math fall into place? Because if you have more feature effort and less man days, that's not something that you would, promise your management or promise your team that we're going to even achieve this goal. And then factor in risk. And one thing that we try to do is effort utilization. I'm not sure if you're aware about this, but every function has a productivity percentage. And this is something that you would get, aware over time, is saying that, so if engineers are working 8 hours in a day, that means they're not coding 8 hours a day, right? They are in meetings for 1 hour. They could be doing something else. They could be doing research. They could be doing prototyping. And then you need to factor that time, saying that we say the effort utilization is 80%, effort utilization is 60% over each functions, and that would give you probably the accurate time to pitch your game. Even if you're talking to investors, you would say, hey, this is the team that we have, and this is the amount of time that we would take to deliver XYZ feature on an XYZ game. So the way we try to do that is 2 ways. One, we are value-driven, which is the first example. Second is ROI-driven. So everyone knows ROI, right? Return on investment. You put in 10 days worth of effort, and this is the feature you're getting, and this is the amount of money you're going to make. So that's ROI-driven. The value-driven is basically a principle from Safe Agile, if you've heard about that. So what it does is takes the business value. It's all in Fibonacci series. So what it does is, let's say in this example, you have feature A and feature B. Both have the same business value. And the timing impact, saying that if I release this feature earlier than before, or earlier than later, will it have a higher impact in terms of the KPIs that it's trying to drive? So then you rate that. And then risk reduction, saying that if I release this feature, am I reducing any risks? Saying that if I'm doing a certain optimization, will this improve the retention by 30% versus getting me 1 cent per player? So that is the risk reduction. And then cost of delay is you just add them up. And size is basically, I think, if you worked with Fibonacci series or poker planning or something like that, you would know that it's basically saying its weight of that feature is 3 and the one below is 8. If you're working in an ROI model, it would have been a no-brainer because feature A costed less time. You would definitely go for that. But if you are value-based, like trying to get more value for the time that you're putting in, then the first example would probably fit into the ecosystem that you're in because it drives more value because it's reducing more risk than feature A. So that's one way we try to look at. And another way is basically ROI-driven, where we are very clear about what's happening and what the impact is. And the option A we use when we are not really sure about how things will go. And then that's why we require a separate lens to look at that. So now that you have a way to devise your roadmaps, so the way we try to distribute the roadmap is saying that, okay, we have 100% capacity. So how are we going to distribute that? So what we try to park is we park 30 to 40% of our time doing experiments, doing prototypes. And then we factor that into our roadmaps. And majority of our time goes into, doing what we know works, pushing out content, doing events, and basically trying to give players what they want at times. And we park some time for doing research and R&D for features that we want to, right? And so now that we know what works, and the other thing that we try to do, reduce pressure on content. The way we try to, this is an example from Mafia Wars. How many of you played Mafia Wars or heard about it? Oh, that's interesting. So if you played this game, you would know that you could grind through a region, and then you would not have to play it. But we try to play on the completionist strategy or mentality, where if you give more stars to a certain task, people would try to get all those 5 stars. And this is something a lot of casual games do try and get there, where they give you 3 stars and they put a goal saying that you need 50 stars to get across the next milestones. And that's what we tried in Mafia Wars. So what it tries to do is, first thing, it eases pressure on content, saying that, hey, we have to release content over content over content. And now by doing this, you would have more bandwidth to do things that you really want to do within a game and ease the pressure on the team of pushing content every time. And also it provides challenge to the players in terms of, hey, I got 1 star, I could get 5 stars. And at that point, Mafia Wars was really a big deal and very social. People actually had Skype chats with the Godfather, if you played the game, to attack other clans. So, and that way people actually tried to mine money out of this. The other thing that we tried to do is events. I did not put the Deer Hunter example here specifically because events are structured differently, but what I'm trying to convey here is something different from what we have in that game. So first example is from Robot Unicorn Attack. If you played a really casual game, platformer, and at the bottom is the extraction run from Mafia Wars. So the way we try to use this, events is really big. I don't want to emphasize on how big events are in mobile games, but what we try to do is do pre-event sale, tell the players that the event is starting in next 5 days, and here is a sale, 30%, 40% discount, and you would definitely see an impact of that sale when it starts before the sales. And it actually helps if you have a periodicity in events, saying that, there's an event every Monday of first week of every month, so that players expect that. And if you have a timer along with it, better, because if players know when the event is starting, they would definitely try to either grind for all the currency required for that event or buy it if you have good systems in place. And we also try to have, if you play Deer Hunter Classic, we have PvP mode in that, and we try to do a lot of bucketing in that so that it's fair to a lot of players. And if you have the technical feasibility, you should go for that. And we try to automate this as much as possible. So we have tools that we can use to schedule the events for the next quarter, and we don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about when are we starting the pre-sales and how the hangover will be, and strategy around that. So if you have questions about this, I'm ready to take here or outside, because there's a lot of data that I can share with you in terms of what I can share. Right? So the other thing that we have both in Deer Hunter Classic and Deer Hunter 2018, along with this, a few examples here, is subscription. The reason I put this up here is there are 3 different genres of games. First one is Jurassic World. If you see, it's a subscription pack. It says you can buy that and then you would get something over time. And the second one is just, again, a similar model, but has a high number of payouts, but it's from Hawk Squadron. If you played the game, it's amazing. And then this is from, again, really detailed credit card kind of VIP subscription, where you have tiers. Players start out with bronze, with certain benefits, versus they could go to platinum or titanium series, they would get those. This is the reason I'm talking about subscription. Is what we've observed is people who are subscribed more have a tendency to come back to the game more, because they're invested and they know that I've invested this amount of money. And then from a studio's perspective, it's guaranteed money, because once you're subscribed, player does not have to be notified to resubscribe again, because as long as you subscribed, studio keeps earning money through subscriptions. And the other way we try to get players back into the game is our notification system. The one way we try to do our notifications is how many of you here have looked at DAU on an hourly basis? So yeah, if you look at DAU on an hourly basis, you would see a sinusoidal wave of when players come into your game and when players actually leave your game. So if you look at those time frames, and that would be the right time to let the players know, hey, this come into the game, because that's where they actually try to log into the game. And it's a good practice to look at DAU in an hourly basis, or if you can group that data if it's possible, because we have the dashboards, we get to do that. So that's one way to look at it. And the other thing that we found out is when you use notifications, with limitations, you can't have all emoticons in a PN, right? When you look at that, we had higher CTRs when we use emoticons versus the push notifications that did not have emoticons, right? So that's one way. The reason, the way we had data is we use a third-party tool called Upside. And Upside lets you do experiments with the same push notifications, and you could send it out to a different set of audiences. And that provides a lot of data. If you haven't heard about Upside, maybe you can log into the website and check them out. And we try not to overdo the PN, push notifications, because I'm sure a lot of games here, or you're aware that you have at least 5 games on your phone, and all of them start throwing, hey, come back to our game, come back to our game, come back to our game. And as a player, as a consumer, you would not appreciate having push notifications on and on when you're sleeping. It's 12 o'clock in the night. If you have the tools to schedule those notifications for a specific time for a specific region, and that would be ideal, and that's what we try to do with the tools that we use. And we play on the current world events, like if there's an event that is coming up, like Christmas, like the holiday events, we try to wish our players, and we see a lot of CTR with that as well. And one thing we try to do is deep link. So I'm not sure a lot of people are aware about deep links. Is basically when you swipe the push notification or you tap the notification, it takes you directly to where you want the player to land on. So if you have a game which has 5 different modes, and within that mode you want him to go to this particular store in that mode, you could do that with deep link. With one tap or one swipe, he will land exactly there where you want him to land. What you're doing by that is you're cutting out the friction from launching the game, trying to do multiple taps, and then making him do the work, rather than where you can ease that pressure. The other thing that we try to do with notifications is we try to do in-game notifications. So most of them in the industry, it's referred to as MOTDs, message of the days. Again, we try not to overdo this, because you have push notifications, then you have these events that go on, and then you have to notify the players about, hey, this is new, you have to play this, and you have to play that. Right? So we try not to overdo this. The way we try to do is we figure out a schedule. We figure out at what instance will this notification trigger. Right? So there are deep links for that as well. Okay, he goes to mode B, and then he goes to play, and that's where we try to trigger a notification if that adds to his experience. Right? And we just don't try to create an ad banner like, hey, this is new, this is new. But if you look at the bottom left and the background, we try to give as much information as possible to make the player aspire to play this event. And bottom left is the event weapon. And we try to play on what they would get as a reward if they play this event, because the events are exclusive. Once the event ends, they can never buy this weapon from the store. Again, we try to make it current and relevant, and then we deep link it. So you tap on this, you're directly taken to events. You don't have to navigate through the whole system. And again, so this is from a notification strategy perspective. Now, let me talk a few minutes about organics. So organics are nothing but the DAU that you get from Google Play Store or App Store without spending money. These are guys who discover your application either by typing in the word in the search, or must have heard about it from your friends, from their friends, or must have read about it in an article. Right? One way we try to do is try to do a lot of ASO ranking optimization. So how many of you know what ASO is? Okay. So for people who don't know ASO, ASO is basically the moment you type in, for let's say, World of Tanks, right? The moment you type in world, the first game that comes up is World of Tanks, if that's what the player is looking for. And that's how you optimize it. So the world becomes your keyword when you submit the app on the App Store or a Google Play Store. And that improves your discovery. So you can have as many as keywords as possible in App Store or Play Store. I think there is certain limitation. I can't recall that at this point. But there is App Annie that lets you see, okay, if I have Deer Hunter, there is another hunting game. How do those two games fill their ASOs, right? So there's certain keywords. So if we are using deer, and if another game is also using deer, then how would our game show up before their game? So there are a lot of articles on this that you can do, but few of them that we use are the app icon. The more frequently you change your app icon, more frequently I mean like once a quarter, and try to keep it relevant, the better for you, because it improves the chances of discovery. Then the other thing that we try to do is, now that Google Play Store and App Store have this taglines about your game, if you try to keep that relevant to your game, that also improves your chances, because I'm sure I read this in an article on Google where they said that anything that Google page has is, they pick up keywords from that and then try to optimize your discovery. And if you look at the example at the bottom left, it's the same game, but has an IP localized in China. And what we try to do at Glue is, this year we have 2018, Deer Hunter 2018. When we go to the next year, it becomes 2019. And that has a huge impact on how players perceive that, because when you have 2019 tag in 2019, it's perceived fresh, it's perceived new. And that's something that, if you can, you should probably play on your IP because it's an established IP. Like I said, the third point is test your creatives. Google Play lets you test your app icons without submitting a binary. It lets you update your feature banner. If you're ever featured, then you would get a feature banner. Then you can update that feature banner. And the third thing is that you can also try to experiment with your app banner pages where players get to see different modes and stuff like that. So you could test that. So we've gotten early winners within 24 hours and we immediately changed that. And then we apply the same changes on App Store. So that has given us a leverage over, because App Store doesn't let you do all this, Google lets you. So we try to optimize as much as possible for discovery through the Google Play Store. And like I said, if you can, please revisit or revise how your App Store text is, because that usually adds a lot of value in terms of discovery. And revive your keywords as much as possible. The rule of thumb is that if your rank for that particular iOS has gone down below 25, you should probably change it, right? So that's one rule of thumb that we try to follow. And the other way we try to do stuff is make money is through ad monetization, but there are certain prerequisites to ad monetization. It just doesn't mean that you have a lot of DAU and you put in ads and ads will magically start generating revenue for you. What you have to be mindful of is where is your DAU coming from, right? If your DAU is of high quality I mean they like the game and they want to play the game, hence they will engage with the game more than anyone else, then it makes sense to showcase ads to them. So you need to have a sense of where their players are coming from. And once you know that, then once you've done the app optimization in terms of your discovery, and that's how you know where you are, and then probably you have to show the relevant ads. What we try to do is not show a product from Thailand in US, right? Because it doesn't make sense. You probably would need to have a really good relationship with your ad provider to avoid those instances. So building relationships with the ad team makes a lot of sense. Just to give you a sense of how many different types of ad units there are in the market at the moment. So everyone knows rewarded videos, and we love rewarded videos because they are player initiated, they're not intrusive. They're app banners, they're interstitials, they are playable ads, rewarded videos, and offer walls. So we try to optimize as much as possible. And one thing that has worked for us brilliantly is offer walls. So if you played Deer Hunter, you would notice that we would have events on offer walls saying that, hey, from day 1 to day 5, if you complete offers, you would get 2x of the hard currency than you would have gotten it otherwise. So if for people who don't know what offer walls are, you must have seen these ads where it says, hey, go to the X game and play until level 10. And then once you cross that level 10, you would get gold in the game that you want it in, right? So those are offer walls. And this is something that has worked brilliantly for us. And this is something that I hope everyone tries to pick up on. And the way all this adds up to how we successfully try to do live operations. But without having real-time dashboards, it becomes really difficult. So when I say real-time dashboards, here is one example. So I'm not sure if a lot of people have played this Dragon Ball Z game on the bottom right. There's an example of that, is how they run sales. They have limited amount, limited edition categories in their sale, right? So we have dashboards that let us configure sales on the fly. And what that gives us is a power over how we could devise a strategy based on the real-time dashboard. One example is when we ran a sale and we saw that, okay, we were not sure that the sale would have hit those numbers, and we wanted to run it for 48 hours. And we saw that within 24 hours, we were able to achieve our target, right, in terms of our expectations. And then we had to say, do we run the sale for the next day or do we stop it? And then because of the real-time dashboards, we were also able to monitor the player wallet sizes. So one prerequisite for any sale to be successful is where you don't inflate your player wallets. And that's where we realize, okay, player wallets are still, there's a gap between our threshold, and then we let the sale ran over the weekend for 48 hours, and then we saw really good returns. And then it actually eliminated the fact that we were running in the dark, right? So that's why kind of real-time dashboards are really important. And real-time dashboards we used for a lot of different cases. Apart from monitoring our primary KPIs, we also try to monitor the secondary KPIs, which I'm not sure if you guys have heard about CUR, RUR, and NUR, which is current user returning rate, new user returning rate, and returning user returning rate. All right, I'm not going to bore you with that, right? So because we had real-time dashboards, we had the tech to build it. We could do that, but in case you don't, there are a lot of third-party companies which let you take their SDK and build your game on top of it, or rather build those SDKs on top of your game, and then provide you that data that you can use for. And we try to do as many experiments as possible in our game whenever we try to do something new, in terms of we don't try to test our ideas with experiments, but test our hypothesis, saying that, hey, we want to build this feature, but we are not sure will the tuning A work for it or tuning B work for it. We don't say, hey, we have X idea and we have Y idea, we want to test both the ideas. We don't do that. We say, this is the idea and this is what we want to test. So we build a hypothesis and we try to test those hypotheses with the AB framework that we have, right? And it lets us do multiple experiments at the same time. So if you have, you have 3-4 features, need not be a new mechanic, but hey, I want to test how this placement of this button on the top right does. Will X people click on it or Y people not click on it? So that's something you could do. And we also have the ability to ramp the experiment up, saying that, hey, we want to expose this feature to only 10% of our DAU and monitor it. And if that works out, then we're going to roll it out to 100%, right? So you could also do that. And then we have the ability to deep segment, saying that we want segmentation, saying that we want to expose this to players who've been in the game for last 90 days and who have paid, let's say, $5. The feature is for them, and let's see how they react to this. Or we go very conservative sometimes, saying that expose this feature only to new installs from X to Y day, so that we have a chunk of players that we could test with. And what we try to do also is do a lot of UX research. I'm not saying we go out and do a lot of focus groups as such, because in live operation it does not make sense. But what we try to do is a lot of in-game surveys. Whenever we devise a roadmap, we try to validate our ideas from player thoughts. Again, you cannot rely on user data, player data on a crude level, but it gives you a sense of your direction, if you're heading in the right direction or not, right? So that's something that is very helpful when we try to do UX research. We try to do it in-game, we try to do it using SurveyMonkey, and provide links using that push notifications, using the in-game notification. When player taps on it, the deep link takes them to Safari or Chrome browser, whatever they are using at that point of time. And so basically, LiveOps comes down to the 5 most important things, according to me, is basically the ability to experiment as much as possible, and having events that ease the pressure on the content cycle, so that your team is not always on this content treadmill of pushing content out. And third is ability to do sales, configure them on the fly, and have the ability to monitor those sales in real time, and making sure the stuff that makes you money, content execution, is what it is. I mean, you don't, if your content has to go on a particular day, it has to go on a particular day. So that requires a lot of pre-planning and planning. And fifth is ad monetization. So concluding the talk, so I'm not saying that everyone should adopt all of this, but look at your teams, try and test any of the, at least one idea from this. I'll be really happy and want to hear about it if it worked or it didn't work. At least I learned from that. And have a sense of clarity about what the game can do and what the game cannot do. Basically saying that if you have a target of making $1 million a day, start in baby steps. Don't just aim for how am I going to make $1 million a day on day one, right? Understand the business. Then try to have a vision, no matter how crude it is, because the team that comes in does the job every day, does definitely work for money, but that's not something that gets them out of their bed and come to office. You need to have a common goal and a vision that they can rally behind. And always listen to your players, prioritize. The one way we try to do this is look at all the Google Play comments, App Store comments, and see how the players are responding, and look at Google ratings, because if you have access to Google dashboard, you would know which regions are giving you bad ratings, which regions are giving you good ratings. When you try to get deeper into that information, you'll realize the countries with lower spec devices generally give you, low ratings because the game might not run on it because we have a 3D game, right? So maybe try to, either optimize your game or blacklist those devices, or, be smart about how you want to expose that to your players. And if you're in soft launch, or if you're making a new game, make sure your events scale with your DAU, right? So it so happens that you build features which cannot handle, and if you're a server-driven game, if you start for 100K DAU, and if your DAU because of featuring goes to 1 million, then your server should be able to handle that kind of a load, right? So yeah, so that's it. That was the talk. Thank you for attending. If there are any questions, I'm ready to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Mozzy, for a very detailed, well-structured, and vivid presentation with good real-life examples. And dear audience, please ask your questions. Anyone? You delivered everything you knew.
Either everything flew above or right into the brain.
Okay. Are you? No? No? Okay. Oh.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that Offerwall is working really well for you. Is it more effective than rewarded ads?
Thank you for the question. I think if you look at ads in general, so each ad unit has eCPM, right? So banner ads have a certain eCPM, and the highest eCPM generally is for offer walls. And since they have a higher eCPM, because we know how our economy works, so the payout is generally higher than the rewarded video ads, because you have to, let's say, for example, the offer wall is you have to play Clash of Clans until level 10, right? You have to be invested in that game and get that money and come back to the game. And then what we've seen is people who do that have a higher retention rate versus people who don't. It's because the reason they do that is to get the hard currency and get invested in this game. So the hypothesis or the concern that generally I've heard is, hey, if we do offer walls, player will just go play the game and never come back to this game. So we need to understand that the reason why he's doing, or he or she is doing that, is to get the hard currency so that they can play the game that they are originally trying to play. Yeah, so short answer is yes, they are more effective than.
So you would not recommend Offerwall for user acquisition, basically, if you look at it from the other side?
No, if the player really wants to go play that game, that means that game is really good. Not that Offerwall is ineffective for UA, but that game in essence has grabbed the player's attention more than our game. Then the fault is with the game that we are working on. We have to optimize our game rather than telling that the UA is, that campaign for that particular game is not effective.
Okay, but in general, you see people coming back to your game, and you're not losing them to Offerwall. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah.
Thank you for your lecture. It's very interesting. Can you say what you use to collect the data? You use cloud service, or you have data warehouse, or something else? And do you use any system like AppsFlyer or other?
Yeah, we use Upside.
AppsFlyer, yes.
For push notifications, we rely on Upside because that is very effective, because it lets you schedule one. It lets you pause a campaign if that's being ineffective. And the third thing, it lets you experiment. So if you want to test out 2 creatives for a particular event, and then you would know the one with the weapon that I showed you had a higher CTR than the one without the weapon. And that's where we realize, okay, putting a weapon on that picture made a difference. Yes. And collecting about data, are you referring to data in general or data for a particular? How do we collect data was your question, right?
What system do you use?
So that's a proprietary Glue system. We don't rely on third party to collect data. So that's within Glue. The tech was built within the Glue company. And that's something that all the studios try to use the SDK and then build analytics.
Thank you. More questions?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you usually starting promote game from the beginning? I mean, if you use any specific platforms for that, or just social media and stuff like that.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Which platforms are you usually used to promote a new game? Like, is that social media or some specific platforms?
So what we try to do, the way we try to promote is, one, if your game is social, like we have in the Glue portfolio, we have a lot of social games. One way to go about is using the Facebook page. And the second way we try to do is through in-game notifications. And we try to give as much as information as possible through that. And then we also try to do this incentivizing campaigns where we do push notifications, where you log into the game at certain points for that push notification, and that leads you to the new feature. Then you would get X amount of X reward, or we try to deep link a reward payload attached to that notification.
Okay, thank you.
One more question.
I've seen the retention rate. Is it your benchmark, or is it is these figures only from the?
Can you speak louder, please?
In presentation, I saw a retention rate, day 1 and day 7. Is it your benchmark? Is it real retention of your game, or is it only just a figures in the presentation?
No, that data was not a game data. I've used that for getting the point across, but we do have benchmarks based on the games that we work on.
Can you say that this benchmark?
No, that's company data. Sorry, I cannot reveal that.
Thank you.
I'll be in trouble.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, speaker. Thank you, audience. That's it.